This podcast of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs is sponsored by AAA Heating and Air.
The premier HVAC company in the Midlands is growing. Are you a top HVAC technician?
AAA Heating and Air is looking for dedicated applicants to fill their fast-growing service department with top-notch HVAC technicians.
If you're the best, then they want you. If you're ready to stop working and start a career, you can earn up to $100,000 plus a year at AAA Heating and Air.
Quality candidates will have at least 2 years experience and a good driving record. Benefits include top industry salaries, commission on service and unit sales, set call limits, company-provided take-home vehicle and gas card, company-provided cell phone and tablet, health, dental, and vision benefits, 401k retirement plan with company match, and scaled PTO based on length of service.
Contact Roy and Dana Finley at 803-677-1500 or check out their job postings on Facebook or ZipRecruiter.
AAA Air when you need us. AAA Heating and Air.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs, founded by firemen. With Chris Clark.
The 2007 South Carolina class was, at that time, 6th in the country and 4th in the SEC, which is amazing.
Wes Mitchell.
You know, I think if you're South Carolina, you're aiming to at least be at 50%. Then in theory, you're adding talent, you're getting better, you're putting yourself in a position to compete.
And Tyler Head.
It's been a great week for South Carolina. On the recruiting front, still certainly plenty to talk about.
On the home of the Gamecocks, 107.5 The Game.
And welcome into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on 107.5 The Game. Tyler, Wes, and Chris along with you. Hope you guys didn't run into the same traffic that Colin and I did this morning. I skated in right at 9 o'clock. Colin didn't get here till about 9:10. It was a brutal morning out on the roads.
No, we took the GC helicopter right on over. No worries about traffic.
It's parked
whatsoever.
right on top of the building.
Yeah.
Might have to borrow that from you guys.
It's good to be Brian Shoemaker, our boss, for those who don't know.
Still no GC Tower. That's planned for the new land acquisition.
Yeah.
Not acquisition. The land that they already have.
Thought we were working on a bowl game sponsorship too.
Yeah, all of it.
All of the above.
There's plenty of time for that.
Yeah.
GC helicopter.
We're here. Shane Beamer talked yesterday. Always full of information, I think.
We had Wes and Tyler. I can't remember who it was about. Y'all are going to have to pick up my slack here. We had I think a 4-part really from Shane Beamer.
Oh, the really?
I think it was 4 or 5.
Yeah. I can't remember which quote that was, and I was listening to it. I know what you're talking about. We'll probably get to it at some point throughout this hour. But yeah, the really is a rarefied one, but he broke it out yesterday.
He did bust it out.
It caught me off guard with what he was talking about, too. I can't.
We'll just have to play all the clips until we get to it and remember.
And again, I don't remember what the context of this one was. Is that him searching for a word, or is he just really trying to emphasize something?
He's
there?
really trying to emphasize the word.
Agreed.
That's a Shane Beamer staple.
I see.
Everybody has their own.
It is funny. Once the guy's around long enough, you start to realize what their tendencies are.
What are some of Shane's other ones?
Film study.
Yeah. I don't. That's definitely a big one.
Yesterday,
there's one I'm not going to call him out on because people are going to just, I feel like, point to it.
You tell me off air.
Yeah, I'll tell you off air. I'm not going to do them like that.
Gotta help the people out. One of the best ones. So this is not a Shane Beamer. So Shane Beamer, one of my favorite things is analyzing how the college football coach, if they go with program or program.
Mm-hmm.
Beamer is program, right? He's always program.
I think he's about 100% program.
Yeah, I've never heard a program with a U. But sometimes you will get the absolute gold of the college coach commingling program and program in the same sentence.
Well, Muschamp was
he was a big program guy.
But no, he would go back and forth in the same sentence.
Same sentence. And actually Dabo did too.
Okay.
So I was texting with our buddy Kev Roche yesterday, sending him some old clips of Dabo and Muschamp using the program in the same sentence, and he was absolutely blown away by the brilliance of it.
Now I'm going to be looking for that next time I hear one of them talk.
It's kind of like it's a great program. No, it's a great program within our program type of thing.
So it's almost like they're talking about two different things.
Yeah, it's like a sub-level.
Okay.
I think for Beamer, it's just all program, though. But go ahead, Wes.
I was going to say, by the way, some real news here, guys. I'm going to steer this ship back onto course. But reading an article right now from Colin Taylor, just went up on Gamecock Central. Men's basketball has landed their first transfer portal commitment of the offseason. Taylon Cooper from Minnesota also played at Morehead State, so he's spent quite a bit of time in the old transfer portal. He lands at South Carolina. I think we all expect South Carolina to be very active in the transfer portal. They really already are, but if they have their way, they will be very active in landing several guys from the portal, and Cooper is the first to make it official. Committing to South Carolina, he averaged a career high last year of 9.8 points, 6.3 assists, shot 39.5% for the field and 37.8% from three. Sounds like a point guard that just from the stats shares the basketball a bit, would be a little bit different maybe than what South Carolina already has on the roster, and clearly was one of the guys that they targeted pretty early on once he hit the transfer portal. That was a name that Colin brought up several weeks ago, actually, as a potential target to come to South Carolina. He's a local guy from Roebuck, so it makes sense why he might want to come back home. And looking at his numbers, pretty solid contributor for an otherwise bad Golden Gophers team. So Lamont Paris, I'm sure, could sell him the opportunity that this team's hopefully turning in the right direction. He can be a part of that coming back home to play.
Yeah, and On3 has Cooper ranked as the number 13 available point guard in the portal currently, number 70 player overall. So really solid pickup when you look at just what On3, their scouts think of him. He's actually going through the draft process right now just to get that feedback. It seems like, guys, he's expected fully to go play another year to pull his name out of the draft before the deadline. But this is an interesting pickup because, we've talked about this notion that, kind of the question being what does South Carolina need out of the portal? Well, it's everything, as we know, to continue improving this roster. But I think if you look at the point guard position, that's one where you can really see the need, like even more so, because you think of, Michi Johnson, probably more of a two guard for you, like, shooter, get to the rack kind of guy. Jacoby Wright, you look at his game, how he administers things on the court. And Wes Ibrahim Adiba last year, expected 6'6" point guard, really good assist numbers at Coastal. Obviously wasn't able to play last year because of the knee injury. So I think that was kind of a void for this team. Adiba, I think, would have played a good bit last year as a facilitator, guy who can rebound, probably would have looked to take a step forward scoring, which he has the skill set to do. But from a point guard perspective, a guy who could dish it out and facilitate, I think they missed that. So now you're looking at a situation where you get Cooper from the portal and you get Adiba back. Now you probably feel better about the point guard position overall. Yeah, this is the new normal, y'all. Like, you're going to see teams have dramatic makeovers in the offseason, I think, and certainly if you're in year two and you're trying to build a program, this is how it's going to look. And I think for them, probably I think a solid pickup and someone that, if you're going into the portal and you're Carolina, I think most teams are probably looking at the portal saying, hey, we need difference makers or fill a gap here or there. With them, like you said, you need all of the above, but it certainly feels like this is someone who you would project to come in and compete to be a starter, right off the bat. And I do think there is value in experience. One thing I look at on the football side all the time, and it actually does, I think, translate over to basketball as well, the physicality, the strength of just being a 21 or 22-year-old versus being a 17 or 18-year-old is just vastly different. And, you're kind of talking about grown men physically as opposed to kids. So, you can find guys in the portal that are physically able to come in and help you right off the bat. Well, and I look at, he's obviously brought in Michi Johnson from Ohio State and bringing somebody from, Minnesota here with Taylon Cooper. That's a very good basketball league, and obviously Minnesota was not a great team, but you've gone up against really good competition, and we all love
Hayden Brown, but there's a difference between bringing in a guy from the Citadel and bringing in a guy from Minnesota in the Big Ten. So you're going out there and you're getting talent from a good conference that's seen good basketball and been able to play against it, and that's certainly something that's hopefully going to help this team next season.
I think when you look at some of the players that Paris has brought in, so Michi Johnson was an intriguing get because this was a guy who, was a highly ranked recruit. I mean, a top 100 guy. Didn't do as much at Ohio State. Injuries were part of that, right? And they had some good teams when he was there. It was kind of a guy who needed a reset, maybe in a fresh start, to see if he could reach his potential. And I think there were some questions about whether he would reach it. Now, he has not arrived by any means. There's a ways to go. But he certainly showed, you watch Michi Johnson this past season, I could see why he was highly ranked. He can get a shot. He can shoot from distance. Streaky shooter, sure. There's more work to be done. But I think they squeezed more production out of him, certainly more than he'd had early in his career. Hayden Brown did some good things for this team. He wasn't an elite-level prospect, but he did some good things. And then Josh Gray, right, with the leap that he took from what he's done early in his career until now. Obviously, from a big-picture roster standpoint, still a lot to do, but maybe Cooper, he's someone who's had a pretty good career so far, but if you can have all of the guys that they're bringing in kind of go the next level, that makes your outlook better to be more competitive overall next year.
Big Josh Gray fan over here, by the way. Like, I just love the way that guy competes. I feel like he improved his game a ton this season. But, I think if you're going to recruit guys out of the portal, going back to, like, Michi Johnson, highly recruited, like you said, if you're going to go the route of highly recruited guy who has not performed, and I say this about football as well, it's really important to do your research on why he has not performed. With Michi, it was a situation, like you said, where there were some injuries involved, kind of playing behind some guys who were ahead of him, in age. And I think sometimes when you get caught up in this guy was a 4-star, we see it from fans a lot. Go get that former 5-star that's in the transfer portal now. And then you look, and they just have not played for 2 or 3 years. And there's not really any main reason why. It's just literally they're getting beat out. I think you have to be very careful taking guys like that in the portal. I would take a Hayden Brown type 10 out of 10 times over the 4 or 5-star guy who didn't play just because they didn't play. Now, if you can find a Michi, a guy who just needs a fresh start, had some injuries, and maybe it wasn't just a misevaluation, then I think that's where you can kind of make your money in the portal.
And I'll say this, to go back around to that, absolutely nothing wrong with Hayden Brown. Ended up being a good, solid player, and certainly someone that Gamecock fans are going to be talking about for a long time. But there were certainly times in SEC play where you could see that he just had not matched up with that level of talent on a consistent basis that kind of showed some cracks there. But obviously a great player that, was one of the first guys to buy into Lamont Paris here at South Carolina. We certainly appreciate him doing that, but excited to see what Talon Cooper is going to be able to do next season and see what else Lamont Paris can bring in this offseason.
Yeah, and Citadel actually has another guy in the transfer portal that South Carolina is monitoring in Stephen Clark, grad transfer. He's someone that I think few schools are looking at, South Carolina included in those. But to your point about Brown, I agree. Look, nobody's going to – I think people will remember last season depending on how the Lamont Paris tenure turns out. If it ends up, look, a few years down the road, you can look back on that team and say that was kind of the first team. I know that's something that Lamont Paris told his guys when their season ended. Hey, this is a team that people are going to remember. It's the first one. It wasn't, there were some memorable moments in there, even though they didn't get the job done, finished that game against Alabama at home. Certainly a memorable game. You think about the Kentucky game. A lot of low points, right, in the season as well. But Hayden Brown, as you said, Tyler, one of the first guys that, bought into it, and he was a glue guy, and he's a great guy, great representative of USC and of the basketball team overall.
All right, Shane Beamer did speak to the media yesterday. We will play our favorite game and spin the wheel of Beamer on the other side. You're listening to the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs, right here on 107.5 The Game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, Presented by Firehouse Subs. Founded by firemen with Chris Clark, Wes Mitchell, and Tyler Head on your home of the Gamecocks. 107.5 The Game.
And welcome back into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. Presented by Firehouse Subs here on 107.5 The Game. Tyler, Wes, and Chris along with you. As we've mentioned, Shane Beamer did speak to the media yesterday. We did carry that for you here on 107.5 The Game. Touched on a number of topics as the Gamecocks are amidst their third week of spring practice. Spring game coming up just 2 weeks from Saturday. These 5 weeks certainly are flying by. And one thing that happens a lot in spring practice is scrimmages. And Shane Beamer talked about what he looks for in these scrimmages yesterday. Here's what he had to say.
One, being able to operate. Obviously, a lot of the things that we're doing offensively are new, just the mechanics of stuff, and we're not going to have coaches out there getting guys lined up every single play. Can we get the communication from the sideline to the quarterback and the play run cleanly and the personnel groupings in and out? Can we not beat ourselves and have dumb penalties like that from an operation standpoint? Same thing on defense, too. We've always used multiple personnel groupings on defense, and we'll continue to. And then, I'm just looking forward to watching our guys compete. There's a lot of new faces, and whether it's true freshmen or transfers, and just watching those guys out there in that setting for the first time, I'm looking forward to. So they've been working hard. The spirit and energy and the competitive spirit and energy and toughness they're practicing with right now has been awesome all 7 days. And I want to see that on Saturday also.
I think, guys, when you go into that first scrimmage, I look at every spring or every preseason, every preseason camp, there's kind of a build-up process. And you get out there and you have several guys that have been there before. It's maybe even a little bit boring for them, like they know exactly what you're going to do, exactly how the process is going to play out. And then you have especially these days, man, you may have half the guys out there that are brand new. And so they're working their way up. They need this step-by-step process. And the first scrimmage, I feel like, is kind of that next step up as you are building towards kind of simulating what a game day would be like within your program. So to Beamer's point, if a running back isn't quite lined up right, or a linebacker isn't quite making the right check at the line of scrimmage, in practice, you may, as a position coach, you may get out there and sort of tap the guy over. You may yell at him an update on, hey, this is your assignment. The scrimmage is sort of that time to go out there and I think make some mistakes, learn, teach up those mistakes, and sort of just see what a guy does without the training wheels. It's kind of like the first time you rode a bike and you have the training wheels on there and you kind of know, even if I screw up, I'm not going to fall over. In this case, if you screw up, then your parent's going to have to be there to help pick you up and put you back on the bike. That's kind of what I look at scrimmages as sort of that next step in the process as you are moving towards an actual game here in a few months.
Yeah, sometimes you have to let guys fail. That's an important part. I've seen a lot of talk that actually in youth sports lately because, not to go on a soapbox rant, but you do see a lot of times the whole participation trophy notion and everything. And I've seen a lot of parents that I really respect that have kids say, hey, you got to, it's high praise. You want to do that, but you also want to allow room for growth. And sometimes that's failure. Dowell Loggins actually talked about that. I think when he was on with Jay and the guys, saying, hey, we're going to let our guys fail sometimes. He wants them to not feel so much pressure that they cannot make a mistake, because oftentimes you see if guys are so worried about being perfect and they're thinking about it too much, you're actually going to make more mistakes. Mm-hmm. And so letting them learn from that, I think, is a really important part of the process. Beamer also hit on something else in that clip, talking about just, administering the offense, not having penalties, personnel groupings. We know that they're throwing a lot at the players right now in an effort to see what they can do and whittle things down and ultimately be able to accentuate their strengths. But we've also heard some talk that, a lot of the players really enjoying this offense. And I do think we'll see, more streamlined communication. Shane Beamer's alluded to the fact that maybe they're not having Spencer read things off a wristband. He's got 100 plays on a wristband. being able to get things out more quickly, having less personnel groupings, those are probably trends that we're going to see this year. But it is still a new offense, and so there's still an adjustment process and just trying to get everything done in practice.
It's funny you bring up him talking about administering the offense there, and Preston kind of decoded that a little bit on the early game this morning. He basically said he's given them what the offense is, the playbook essentially. That by no means that they have it down pat or can go out there and play a game with it this weekend. It just means they know what's in it, and they're still in the process of learning it.
Yeah, for sure.
On the note of guys needing some help getting up to speed a little bit, Beamer also talked about that yesterday. Here's what he had to say.
It's one, taking advantage, throwing them out there, and to me, there's only way you can learn and get better is to get out there and get reps. So that's what we did today in some situations. Just threw a lot of those guys out there and just let them go. We'll do that on Thursday in practice. We'll do that in the scrimmage on Saturday, get those guys work. But then it's also their responsibility to make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing in the time now between practice on Tuesday and practice on Thursday. They got the rest of the afternoon from an academic standpoint, but then when they're free, are they spending that time on football and doing everything in their power to learn what to do? And if you know what to do, you're going to get more opportunities. And then when they come in here tomorrow morning and we have a special teams meeting at 8 a.m., do they learn in that special teams meeting and get better? Then when we break and the offense lifts and the defense meets, and then then we flip it after an hour and a half, are they using that time to get better? So it's not just, to me, the Tuesday, Thursday, Saturdays that we're practicing. It's the whole bulk of spring practice. There's a lot of learning opportunities, and it's spending the time that they need to spend outside this building on football, but then also making sure they're capitalizing on every opportunity they get out there on the field as well. And then it's our job as coaches, obviously, to figure out what they don't know and why they may be struggling with something, or whether it be a technique or a scheme, and do our job and coach and teach as well.
Yeah, that really hits on kind of what Wes was talking about there, and really what we were talking about with letting players fail, being able to correct those mistakes, whether it's in a practice situation, scrimmage situation, as Wes alluded to. You're going to have, that's kind of when the live action, and you're going to give your players more room to fail in that regard, and you're going to go back and look at the tape, be able to correct things more, maybe not on the field during a scrimmage, but you're going to be correcting the players after the fact, as opposed to in practice where you're doing it on more of a real-time basis. But, there's a lot, being thrown at the guys right now. It's kind of different because when you look at Pete Limbo's special team scheme, for example, Clayton White, his defensive scheme, you can obviously tweak those things, but there's a base knowledge of what they're doing. This is year 3. They've been doing it since the 2021 season, lots of these guys. But as Beamer said, there's some new faces. And so whether you're plugging in new faces to how you're doing things from a special teams or defensive standpoint, or you're plugging in this new offense that, again, does have some carryover, you've got a combination of veteran guys and newer guys that are all kind of learning together. And so go ahead, Tom.
I was going to say, and Beamer brought up the point there, that it's not just what's happening in practice as well. And I think this is more particularly for the guys that come in as early enrollees as freshmen, but it can also be said for the transfers as well. It's what you're doing outside of practice, how you're spending your time when you're not in class studying, getting yourself prepared so you can get up to speed faster and be more adapted to this, as the spring rolls along.
Definitely. Let's you want to go back out to the wheel of Beamer?
Let's hit the break one more time, and we'll give it a spin on the other side. You're listening to the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs, right here on 107.5 The Game. And back in on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler, West, and Chris along with you. Another spin of the Beamer wheel coming up. But first, it's Wednesday. Got to tell them about the Firehouse Subs Sub of the Day.
Sub of the Day today. One of my favorites, and now one of Wes's favorites, we're happy to say.
I didn't even have to look this one up. I now know. New York Steamer, $7.99 for a medium. And we're going to also, Chris, tell everybody about what is going to be the unofficial sub of the day for, I guess, for weeks now. The Smokin' Triple Stack. It is beef brisket, smoked turkey breast, Virginia honey ham, cheddar cheese, sweet and tangy slaw, barbecue sauce, and mayo on a toasted sub roll.
Yeah.
My goodness.
That basically, here's what they did. They did what I would do if Larry Chandler, the owner of all the Firehouse Subs here in the Midlands and beyond, if Larry was just like, Wes, go back there and make whatever you want. And I said, all right, I'm going to put everything on here. Here's what's going to make that sub the best is the fact that they have the brisket on there, which is actually my favorite, of their meats, and then balancing out the slaw and the barbecue sauce. If the slaw and the barbecue sauce is done right on a sandwich, which we got a little preview of this one, and they match up very well, then that is a perfect combination. So the smoking triple stack, I might go try this one today, Chris. We got a little taste of it, but not the full thing because it wasn't on the menu yet last month. So now I want to try the official version.
And I believe that is an app or online exclusive.
Oh, good call. Yeah, don't go in there. I mean, I feel like they probably still make it for you.
It's
but
like
officially,
a secret menu type of thing.
Officially, you got to go online, firehousesubs.com, Rapid Rescue, or hit it on the app.
Speaking of buildings, talking about sandwiches, Shane Beamer continues to build with his coaching staff. We obviously know that Freddie Kitchens departed from North Carolina, I guess a couple of months ago now at this point, from his offensive analyst position. So, of course, Shane Beamer was going to fill that role, and he filled it with Sean Ryan, who comes from the Carolina Panthers under the Matt Rule regime, where he was their quarterbacks coach. Of course, Frank Wright, now the head coach over there, has brought in his own guy. So Shane Beamer brings in another NFL guy to the offensive coaching room, and here's what he had to say about it yesterday.
I think everything's been gone through. We brought on Sean as an offensive assistant, somebody that I've didn't really know him well. Phil knew of him for a long time back when he worked with the Houston Texans. Bill O'Brien was the head coach of the Texans, and Billy was the running backs coach when I was at Georgia Tech as a graduate assistant. And Billy was the head coach, and Craig Fitzgerald, the whole strength coach here at South Carolina, was his strength coach. And I went out to Houston 2 or 3 times just to spend some time with those guys as a coaching staff, and didn't really spend a whole lot of time with Sean. I was with some of the other guys that I knew, but just watched him coach and knew of him. And obviously being up in Charlotte last year with the Panthers, and it was an opportunity. The guy was close and had some connections to Dow, and it's just another set of eyes, very similar to a role that Freddie Kitchens was in for us last year. Another set of eyes for those guys in that offensive staff room, and somebody that has coached offense for a long time and can continue to make us better. And again, any staff hire that I make, I'm a less is more guy. I don't want to be hiring people just to hire people. I don't want a ton of people in this program that don't have defined roles. And this was an opportunity to get somebody in here that could make us better.
I think you continue to see Shane Beamer and company kind of lean on this NFL experience when it makes sense, right? And, I've kind of always liked Beamer's point or approach, if you will, that I don't think he wants to hire 30 analysts and then just have a bunch of guys sitting around not really having a defined role and not really knowing what their job is. And, sometimes up to a certain extent, less is more. Now, if you don't have the resources and you're going up against programs that have, 10 guys doing scouting reports and you have none, then, it can be something that works against you. But I think when you have too many different people in the building, too many different thoughts in the building, there's a point of diminishing returns. So you want to be able to empower your guys to actually feel a part of the program. You want them to feel connected to the program. And, it just makes sense that they went back into kind of an NFL approach. I think we've seen Beamer lean on that quite a bit.
And I'll ask you guys this, being the recruiting insiders, how much more attractive is that to a high school kid saying, hey, you're going to come here, you're going to be coached by a guy that was a former OC in the NFL, you're going to have assistants and analysts that were in the NFL. Obviously, everybody that comes to college, at least 99% of them, are trying to get to the league themselves. So when you have a room full of guys that have been there, how much easier is that to sell to a recruit?
Yeah, I'm not going to say it puts you over the top automatically. I think recruits look at the recruiting process in some ways kind of like a it's like if you had a pie and you said this percentage, this might be about facilities. This might, 33% of my decision might be about NIL. The other part might be about what scheme do they play in. Some of it might be about depth chart. It's kind of a small piece of it, but depending on the prospect, it could be bigger or it could be smaller. And I think in this case, if you're Beamer, the fact that this has kind of been a trend within your program, bring in a Sterling Lucas as well. You talk about the on-field guys, bring in Jody Wright from the NFL. It kind of is something you see throughout South Carolina's program. So if I'm a guy if I'm a recruit, I should say, looking at South Carolina, and I see, well, this guy's got NFL ties, this guy has, and it kind of permeates the entire program, then certainly that's something you can use to your advantage. I still think the single biggest thing for a recruit is actually relationships and comfort level at a place. Probably next, depth chart, ability to play, scheme fit, NIL, but certainly it doesn't hurt.
And speaking of coaching analysts, you also had the departure of Shaq Wilson as well from the defensive side, going to the New York Jets as then assistant defensive line coach, and Beamer is going to be working on filling that position. We had one coming in and one coming out essentially there.
Yeah, and Shaq's a guy, everybody here is familiar with Shaq. Beamer talked about how he got kind of upset when he told Beamer he was leaving, but it's such a good opportunity for him. And Shaq has paid his dues, man. This guy's been grinding ever since he transitioned from being a student athlete to being, I don't even remember what his first role was with South Carolina. I guess maybe some type of grad assistant or even student coach or something. But Shaq has paid his dues. This will be a great opportunity. It kind of reminds me, I think there are several guys out there who are in coaching. Y'all remember when Beamer, that quote Beamer likes to give where he says, in order to maybe one day be the head coach at South Carolina, I had to leave South Carolina as an assistant. I think there are several guys who are now at other places that are getting valuable experience. If Shaq goes off to the NFL, gets some extra experience, Carolina one day has an opening on their defensive side of the ball, Shaq's got a little bit more seasoning, then maybe he's one of the first guys you call 3 or 4 years from now when you have that on-field role that is available. Sometimes you got to leave home, get that experience, and then come back home.
Something else that Beamer talked about yesterday, and I know it's your guys' favorite topic, what's happening on the offensive line. He talked about mixing and matching with all the bodies that you have there right now.
Matching and rolling guys in there, but primarily, we got Jalen, Nick / Ja'Kai, Vershawn, Trey Jones, Wanamaker. I think those 6 been pretty regular. Marquis Anderson's a true freshman that certainly has really opened up a lot of eyes and getting some work. But by no means, we talked about it in the team meeting this morning. There's no jobs that are settled. There's no jobs that we know this is going to be the starting 5 or the starting anything. We're competing, and we're not even halfway through spring practice. And eager to see, do those guys that are working with those top groups, not just at offensive line, but any position, do they continue to get better and separate themselves from everybody else? Or do they get complacent because we're halfway through spring practice and all of a sudden get beat out? That's what I'm eager to see. But we feel pretty good about those guys on the offensive line and also some young guys. Ryan Brubaker, Kason Henry's been hurt, but eager to get him back out there coming off surgery. And Brubaker and Grayson Maines. There's a lot of young guys that we're excited to continue to get a lot of work, and that's the one thing that we want to do here going forward is, some of these guys that maybe haven't gotten as much work these first 6 practices, really throw them in there and get them a lot of opportunities here the last half of spring practice and see what they can do.
I feel like we have a decent sense, and Wes, tell me if you disagree with this, on probably, the top maybe 7 to 8 guys on this offensive line. Generally, that's what you hear coaches say, right? We want to have our starting 5, but we want to feel good about 7 to 8 guys in total. And again, that doesn't necessarily mean, okay, who is the backup, say, picking a random position, backup left guard on the depth chart. It's really about which guy are you putting in next, and that could be at a variety of spots. So that's someone like, to just pull a random example, Vershawn Lee. If he's not the starter at center, if Nick Gargiulo, say, is the starter at center, well, Vershawn can slide over to another spot. Or he could be a 6 guy where he can come in and play basically any position on the line. So we've talked about this before, the notion that although South Carolina loses 3 talented, experienced starting offensive linemen at center, at a guard spot and at a tackle spot, they have some guys who already have experience, and not just, garbage time experience. They have meaningful experience, and they have some positional versatility. So it's pretty evident. I mean, Shane Beamer is rightfully talking about, or correctly talking about, I think, how important it is for some of these younger guys, Ryan Brubaker, for instance, who's been working at center, to get reps during the spring, and how important this time is for competition. There are still some questions, I think, about who may start at what spot, specifically at center. That battle's going to keep going. We can project what we think may happen ultimately during the season, but there's plenty of time for that to play out. I do think, though, there's a pretty good sense probably of who the top 7 to 8 guys are on this offensive line.
Yeah, and I think you can project it pretty accurately at this point, even though, I think the coaches would push back on that and say, hey, there's multiple months until the season kicks off. You want to keep these guys fighting it out, and hey, somebody new could emerge at any time. You never know when the light bulb will sort of come on and a guy will start pushing. But I think if the season started this coming Saturday and you were playing a game instead of having a scrimmage, you could probably map it out pretty easily. I think certainly right now we have a feel for probably who your starting tackles are, and I think probably even your interior guys and that additional interior guy. So if you look at it like, all right, you have 3 starters on the interior, and then you're looking for that one guy who comes in, no matter who had to come out, you probably could name that additional guy. I think the spot we probably don't have a feel for would be offensive tackle, where I think we could project your starters, but I don't know who next man up would be if one of those guys were to go down. Would that look like, I mean, I'm just kind of guessing here. If that 4th interior guy is kind of your 6th man all the way around, then technically I think I would probably insert Ja'Kai Moore as the next offensive tackle if somebody were to go down, and then put my 6th guy at left guard, in place of Ja'Kai. That would maybe, we're just kind of spitballing here, but that would maybe be the scenario there.
Hear a little bit more from Beamer as we close out the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on the other side, including him talking about a big name on defense that's been granted another year of eligibility. That's next on 107.5 The Game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs, founded by firemen with Chris Clark, Wes Mitchell, and Tyler Head on your home of the Gamecocks. 107.5 The Game.
And welcome back into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. 107.5 The Game. Tyler, Wes, and Chris along with you. Before we give the wheel of Beamer a few more spins, we got to thank our friends over at Amy Mason Cup State Farm being a great sport of the show.
It's always good to save, isn't it? It's always good to also feel like that you have insurance that's good insurance, and insurance that is given to you by a trustworthy team. And that's exactly what you can get with Amy Mason Cup State Farm. She helped me and my family when we were looking to switch and save. We called Amy Mason Cup State Farm, and she took care of the rest. Her experienced, knowledgeable, responsive, and helpful team can help you with all sorts of insurance policies, from home, auto, business, boat, renter's insurance, life insurance, anything that you need. Give her a call or visit her website. It's AmyMasonCup.com. That's Amy, MASINCUPP.com, or give her a call, 803-772-5554. Her office is right down the road from the studio here, 612 St. Andrews Road, Suite 4. That's Ashland Park Plaza, just off of I-26. And make sure when you call Amy or visit her website that you ask about the new Drive Safe and Save app from State Farm. Has dynamic new features like interactive maps and driving tips, and you can earn up to 30% savings on your insurance. Again, that's Amy Mason Cup State Farm, AmyMasonCup.com. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Well, the Gamecocks got some insurance at their edge position as Jordan Strawn was granted a 7th year of eligibility. Here's what Beamer had to say about it yesterday.
Official, he is good to go. And excited for him and thankful that the powers that be decided that. And then Dante, we're still waiting on final word.
He, of course, talking about Dante Miller there at the end, still waiting to see if he is able to get an extra year as well. But it has always, Chris, looked like Strawn had a stronger case. And, Carolina has been operating as if they were going to have Strawn back pretty much the entire offseason. Now it becomes official, and obviously big news. You still have the injury element here, the fact that you're hopeful if you're a Carolina fan or coach or, Strawn himself, that you are able to get back to fully 100% coming off of that knee injury. But certainly a spot where, you just pencil him in, I think, as a starter. I was looking back, Chris. It's easy to forget kind of where your mind was at a certain point in time. Going into last year, I thought Strawn was set up after kind of playing that reserve role. He was next man up. He and Birch were the prior season. Obviously, he was going to be a starter last year. He was a starter the first 2 games. I think he was set up for a massive season. He'd already accumulated 10 tackles, a tackle for loss and a half, a sack in just those 1+ games that he was in. So the first game, then part of the Arkansas game. And really was on a tear. He had a career-high 6 tackles against Arkansas before the injury. And I think as far as just having, I've talked about this actually quite a bit lately, you have to have some baseline traits at that edge spot, defensive end spot, whatever you want to call it. And he has them. He looks like an SEC defensive end is supposed to look. He's long. He can make plays against the run as well. But most importantly, he can defeat offensive tackles in one-on-one pass rush situations. So I think if you're Carolina, again, assuming the injury, the health side of it, it allows you to go ahead and circle one spot that you kind of lock in there. And now I think you kind of move ahead. You say, all right, can you find an SEC starter-level edge guy in the portal? If you can do that, then you lock that guy into the spot opposite Strawn. Then all of a sudden, you actually have a bunch of kids who I think are capable of fighting it out to kind of be your 3rd and 4th options at that position.
Yeah, and what if you could get 1 or 2 out of the portal? That seems very ideal because then maybe you're finding a starter to pair with Strawn, and then you're finding another depth guy, whatever that may mean in terms of, is it a guy that can give you 10 snaps? Is it a guy that can give you 20? Now you're not 3 deep, right, in terms of like there's going to be some drop-off from that first team to 2nd to 3rd. But right now, it's huge to get Strawn back because you're already in a bad spot and a bad way from a depth standpoint. But you get not just a starter, but an impactful starter. Jordan Strawn, former high school safety, 6'4", 190, coming out of high school, and now is what he is. But that athleticism, those traits, I think, Wes, that you mentioned, come from that. But if you get him in, let's say you get Strawn, hypothetically, you get another starter from the portal and a depth guy. Now you've got your 2 starters. You've got, say, Des Umeozulu and another portal guy. And then you've got Dawkins, Tyreek Johnson. You feel a lot better if you can do that. So I think that's the ideal situation for South Carolina if they can do that. But his return for this team is just massive.
Well, I think you look at a guy like Tyreek Johnson. I looked it up yesterday, Chris. He played, I think it was somewhere around 150, 160 snaps last year, and actually, at least according to PFF, graded out well. So I think he can play that role for you just fine. And I think you look at Des Umeozulu, it's not ideal to just force this kid to go play in the SEC and say, go get it, good luck. And if you're able to put some guys ahead of him and sort of establish a little bit of a buffer zone there, then I think you're going to get something out of Dez this year, but you want for it to be a little bit more structured and allowing him to come along. Now, he's super talented. He may, if he just pushes in, let's say you bring that transfer portal, depth guy in, there's a scenario where Dez just passes him, But you want him to be able to earn that spot as opposed to having to throw him out there. And then I think you can do some mix and match things. You can slide Tonka out, play him in certain situations. I think the guy to pair with Tonka as far as down and distance is you would have Tonka on first or second downs and then maybe bring in a Brian Thomas Jr. on if it was a pass rush situation. So you can do some smoke and mirrors, but at the end of the day, at that spot, you really don't want to have to be doing mix and match and smoke and mirror. You just want to be able to say, hey, we got a dude here. We got a dude on the other side. We're going to put our best guys out there because they're talented enough to be 3 down defensive ends. That is what you're hoping for.
Real quick as we wrap up here, when you think of guys that spend a lot of time as college athletes, what are a few names that pop up in your mind? Because Jordan Strong going into his 7th year, that's quite an accomplishment that not everybody can say they were able to do.
Well, and nobody comes to mind immediately. I know there's a guy in Oregon that got like 9 years, I think. I don't know how that works. The math for Strong is actually pretty simple. He got injured in week 2 last year. If you go back to 2019, I think it was, got injured in game 1. Can you imagine being a starter? You're playing against an SEC team. You're playing against Tennessee. I think he already had a sack, had a bunch of pressures, and you're lost for the year after 17 snaps into your year. So I actually give the NCAA some credit. That's something we rarely do. Give him some credit. I know it's 7 years. It seems like a lot, but he's missed almost 2 full seasons due to injury. A great situation for him to come back and prove he's back. I still think, y'all, this is an NFL caliber prospect. So if he can have the year I think he can, he has a chance to put himself into those draft conversations.
Absolutely. And that'll do it for today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. Halftime show with Jay and Terry coming up next right here on 107.5 The Game.